Hi, Patricia.
Hi,
Welcome to
Crystal.
Activating Magic. I'm so
Thank you.
excited to have you.
It's a perfect day to be part of this.
Oh, it's always a perfect day in your world, I know. So I want to give people just a little bit of background. I shared your bio, but we've known each other for over a decade, which is amazing to think about. I remember hosting an event in Las Vegas,
Mhm.
and this feisty woman, passionate as all get out, in her 70s, going to the microphone, asking questions, sharing insight and wisdom. And that was over a decade ago, which is hard to believe. And our friendship has been really special to me. And I know you've been on a journey in recent years, where most of us have been through COVID and, quarantine and all of that, but you've had an extra journey on top of it. So, um, let's start with how do you want to be known with this group? Like, just share a little bit of your story.
It's really interesting because I was pondering on that. And part of what has risen for me is letting go. This whole process has helped me to really let go. And part of what I've been working on is letting go of all the labels, the brands, the names, etc., and just allow my soul energy to come forth. And
Mm.
that's what seems to be working for me better than anything else I've ever tried in my life.
Ooh, letting go of all the labels and brands. We'll definitely dive into that. I love that. Okay, so let's go back to, when we met, you had just retired or were in the process of retiring from a long career as an educator. And I know throughout our relationship, you've shared with me different, um, you know, accomplishments that your past students have had, the love that you have for them, the way you really served and supported your students to be their highest self, and to believe and to know that they could do anything in this world. And I know your belief in them made a huge difference. So, because this podcast is called Activating Magic, to me, our magic is that little slice of sourced energy that we came here to be. So, I have two questions just about your career as a teacher. I'm curious, first of all, what was it in your students? Like, how did you experience them that helped you really make them come alive and be their best self?
Well, first of all, I think part of it had to do with the fact that I worked in schools that were low income, children coming from a lot of dysfunctional families. And so my compassion energy got an opportunity to really, be there present for them. And I'd get in trouble because, I'd hug kids and stuff, and you're not supposed to hug kids these days, I guess. And I chose to just be with kids and encourage them and telling them to never give up, that they were more than what they were that day, to
Mm,
always keep trying their best. And that's what seemed to carry me, and just using their
mm,
energy. I started my teaching career in Oregon, which was, I had one African American student in the whole 2 years I was there. And then I get thrown into coma when my first school was 99% Black. And I
mm.
thought, oh my God, now what do I do? Because even though I grew up in a community that was diverse, I had never worked with, a school that was predominantly one race or another. And so I chose to just see who they were and use their energy, and
Mm.
use their energy to propel what we did and learn from them through that. And that's what carried me forth. And, I had a really good time. And I was working with little kids. Then I started out my career working at the high school level, and started a coaching program for girls in sports. And this was before Title IX. So the
Mm.
girls I worked with, I kept emphasizing that, they were really pioneers in moving forward toward equity in girls sports. And, I look at girls sports now, and it's a whole different world, a whole different universe. And I keep telling my girls that I still have contact with, I says, you were the pioneers, you planted the seeds.
That's amazing. Oh my goodness. A couple of things you said I want to highlight. You talked about compassion. And in the framework that I teach now, the quiz, compassion magic is one of the magics. It's
Mm-hmm.
this healing with your heart, complete non-judgment and acceptance, feeling with people versus trying to rescue them, right? Like knowing and listening to them as bigger than they even know themselves to be. And that's what I hear in what you're sharing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, like to me, having come from a family, I grew up poor. I grew up in a low income household. I grew up in a household that was authoritarian. We always knew that my dad was the boss, and we'll get more into this as we talk about the principles. But my grandmother, mi abuelita, was just very instrumental in my upbringing. In fact, I'm wearing a rosary that my cousin sent to me, and I always wear something that has my grandmother's presence with me to get me through
Mhm.
whatever I do. And coming from there and always having high expectations that I could reach something. And I was really blessed to have had, for the most part, except for one bad year in school, really outstanding teachers who encouraged my excellence and pushed me for that. And I'm very grateful.
I
And
imagine that's part of why you became a teacher.
yeah, oh, yeah. I mean, I knew I wanted to be a teacher after my first year in school.
Mm.
And so those were some of the factors that went into play as I grew up.
If you said one of the things that you did is you saw who they were and used their energy. Can you talk more about that? How you experienced using their energy?
Well, instead of putting them down for being so active, I'd use that
Mm.
energy and say, okay, instead of letting you run around loose in the gym, I'll walk you to your spot and learn a little bit more about who you are as a
Mm.
person, using their energy because they had a lot of energy, just planning activities where they could express that energy instead of containing it.
Uh,
And those were some of the things that seemed to work really well. And just asking them questions about who they are. Where do you live? Tell me something about what you like, even though I had very little time with them. But, I'd always make sure I met them at the door
mm.
and always look into their eyes. And I'd say something like, oh, your eyes are telling me you're going to have fun today. And then, they
I love that. That's amazing. Okay. Well, so talk a little bit about your recent journey. So, March 2020, diagnosed with breast cancer.
Mhm.
And what was that moment for you?
Well, let me just go back a couple of weeks before that. I was meditating and I had purposely not done my mammogram that I did for every year and always gotten it clear. I thought, well, I can skip a year and everything's cool and I'm older now. So, if I haven't gotten it now, I'm not going to get it. And in
Mm.
my meditation, I heard very clearly, Patricia, schedule your mammogram. And I thought, So I did. And I went through the process and they told me to come back and they needed to get more data, so to speak, so they did a biopsy. And they told me that they found breast cancer. And for me, I really thought a lot about that because most people I talk to, really panic
Yeah.
and, it's just such a mind blowing experience that for me, part of what protected me were my angels that came through with mi abuelita and my mom. And I heard their voice so clearly saying, Patricia, don't worry, we're going to take good care of you. And that put me in a state of calm, in a state of mindfulness. Like I remember feeling the floor, feeling my body, and knowing that I was going to be okay. And my two friends that had gone with me that day, whom I had only met 3 months earlier, and they've been the captains of my team. And they just reached out to me and they said, Patricia, we got this. And they've been there with me every moment, every step of the way of the journey. And
Mm.
so I knew everything was going to be okay.
And
And
like,
there's something my friend calls me Pollyanna because she said you're always thinking everything's going to be okay, and I said, well, it is. There's a trust, a faith that I got from my grandmother that has carried me all my life. That no matter how bad things get, I know something's going to work out.
and, you know, the timing being at the beginning of COVID and navigating all of that at that time, how do you interpret that? Like, you weren't going to get the mammogram. You got the message to do it. All of this stuff is happening in the world, and then you embark on this journey.
Well, I am always, people say you're always ahead of the game. Um, what I did is I saw it as a blessing because I I asked the universe or Sophia, whomever God, that I really wanted a female team for my medical team, and it was interesting because the first round, that's what I got. My breast surgeon was a woman, my naturopath was a woman, my oncologist was a woman, my radiologist was a woman. The first woman I met when I went in was a Hispanic woman, and I can't tell people how empowering that was for me to be able to talk in Spanish with somebody at this time of crisis, that could have, turned in Wonkas on me. Um, so those are the kinds of things that helped me. I remember my first day of chemo was the first day that the governor here in Washington had called for people staying home, and nobody goes to work except the people that were absolutely necessary. And so my two friends, Judy and Sherry, they said, we're going to make sure that you get to where you need to go. You don't have to drive. And like I said, they've been angels all the way. And they asked me, instead of telling me what to do or how they could support me, they asked me, what do you need that we can be of assistance to you? So that was really empowering to me because I got to choose. I was the decision maker. And I said, I want some laughter, I want some prayer, I want some meditation, and then some blessings. And that's what we did. So driving down to the center, we played Proud Mary, Tina Turner's Proud Mary, and we were laughing and singing, and that took away a lot of the nervousness and the anxiety that I was experiencing. And then we said a prayer and we meditated when we got there, and we sent light and blessings to the care team and everything worked out great. And it's been that way since. And since then, on the second round, after I had reoccurrence, I do have men on my team, and they've been great, just great. So it's been an opportunity for me to pull together both of my energies, my masculine energy and my feminine energy, and I feel an integration. Sometimes I feel in my body like the energy just moving up in a spiral, and it goes right on out my body, and I feel really grounded.
Wow. I know the messages and updates I've received from you have always been about the people you met in the waiting room, or, the chance encounters, or the way you've brought light to the hospital and the people there when they were under such stress.
Yeah. It is
It's really
stressful, that's for
amazing.
sure, but I keep saying it's not the cancer, it's how we respond to the cancer that I think has made the difference.
Mm,
I made a choice that I was not going to be the victim. I was going to use cancer as a learning partner in my journey.
yeah. Well, that feels like a good segue into the four principles of healing.
Okay.
And, I know these are principles that you've written about, that you've practiced for a decade or more. And like, how has this served you as you've been on this health and healing journey? So let's talk about, what's the first principle?
All right. The first principle is con cariño mi, and con cariño means with love and kindness always, and that was the guiding principle that I got from my abuelita. She'd always say con
Your
cariño mi,
grandmother.
con cariño. And so I've applied that all of my life. I didn't realize that I was. And let me back to the side. I wrote my memoir, and it's written, but it hasn't been published. And one of the things I got from that experience was I identified the four principles by which I had lived my life. I can't say that I had consciously lived by those principles, but they had been my guiding post. And
Yeah.
so writing the memoir brought them into the light for me. So the first principle was con cariño. And what that means is, first we have to love ourselves. And that, a lot of people I talk to blame themselves or feel guilty that about getting cancer. And one of the things that came up for me under that principle is the first person we have to be kind and loving to is ourselves, and have compassion for ourselves.
Mm.
And the second principle is con ganas, which is from my abuelito, my
Well,
grandpa.
can I ask a question about the
Yeah.
first?
Hmm.
Um, I love that you point out that so often people blame themselves versus bring self-love. And what would you say to someone in that spot, right? Because I know especially in our consciousness world, and we believe in mind body and all of that, that can be a place like I think you knew me when I injured my shoulder, and I remember being so embarrassed that I had this problem with my body because like what was I doing that I created this? And I really had to work through that self-judgment. So what would you say to someone who's dealing with something health-wise
Well,
about that?
yeah, I think that's a really important question. And what I have done, and I want to be real sure that I let people know I'm not offering medical advice or counseling advice or anything, that this is just my experience, my journey. And what I have done in terms of the self love is I've used journaling. One of the things that I've done, and because I've never journaled, I've never been one to sit down and write.
Mm.
I tend to write in spurts, when I get the inspiration, that's when the writing comes out and it comes out okay. So just reflecting on the journey, going back and healing some of the trauma that we've experienced in our life. Like for me, I had a lot of trauma in my life, especially as a child. I've had as an adult a gun pointed to my head, and those kinds of things just kind of sit there if you don't deal with them. Then so they pop up at there. So those are two of the things that I do. Um, Part of the self care is being able to move and do, even if it's just to get out of bed,
Mm.
but move. And the first thing that I do is I always profess gratefulness. When I wake up, I'm lucky to have my little dog that sleeps next to me in his crate. And so, I always do a little prayer with him. And
Mhm.
he'll be 18 here in 6 months. And, he's still broken. He's deaf, he's gone blind, but he's been my little
Mm.
resource of strong faith. And watching him, how he goes through his journey, has been a real inspiration to me.
Mm. Pepito. Um, and con Carino, when you are getting chemo or at the hospital or having all of these appointments and extra things, how does that serve you there?
Con cariño.
Mhm.
Well, what I do is, I just I like to use the humor a lot, and laughter. And one of the things that I've always been, having been in sales and stuff, I'm extroverted and out in the outer world, but this journey has helped move me more inward.
Mm.
And so I just talk with people and I say hi, how you doing? And my name's Patricia, and is this your first time? Or I always try to notice something about them, observe something about them that I can begin the connection. It's all about connecting with people and connecting with where they might be, noticing, do they look scared? Do they look calm? For example, this one little man, he was sitting across the chemo room from me, and I saw his feet were crossed like this. And I thought, he's got his shoes on the wrong foot. And
Mm.
he was so quiet and so peaceful. And I went up and I said, sir, I said, I don't mean to bother you. I said, but do you have your shoes on the right feet? He said, yeah, I just have my feet crossed. And I said, oh, okay. And we started connecting. And I said, you seem so peaceful to me. I said, I really have been experiencing your energy across the room. And he said, you get to that place of acceptance.
Mm.
And I never saw him again, but his words have stayed with me. And
Mm.
he was just a real diminutive little fellow, and just as kind as could be. I remember his eyes, and his eyes just spoke of love.
Mhm.
And I don't
That's
know if he's still
beautiful.
on the plane of the earth or not, but that one communication with him was just powerful. So just
And
for things like that, that you can connect. Connection, I would say, is the biggest.
yeah, I can get how the connection would, support other people, especially if
Mhm.
it's their first time and all of that. How did that connection support you?
I just felt more grounded. I feel more grounded. I feel like it's more of who I really am instead of just faking it. I don't need to fake it. I can. One of the things that has been a challenge for me is because so many people still are in that phase of either shock or whatever, or they just choose to play the victimhood game. I don't know what it is, but being upbeat and positive and giving them an opportunity to see things differently, that feels really soothing to me. And that's where I get my nurturance. That's where I think part of my healing has come. It's just that possibility. I call it shifting the possibility. You call it shifting the
Yeah.
field, but I call it shifting possibilities. Or for me, it's
Yeah.
the possibilities opening up to the miracle that is there waiting to happen.
That's awesome. Okay, so you started to talk about number two.
Yes. Number two was my abuelito, mi papa. I never saw my papa without his pipe. I still see him. But his principle was con ganas, todo es posible. And what he meant by that was with desire and willingness and action. And he always said, and remember the action, all things are possible. So I thought, this has to apply to healing too, or to wellness. Because if I have the desire to heal, if I have the desire and the willingness to do what it takes to heal, and I apply all the things that need to be done, I will experience wellness. And it helped me accept the fact that maybe the body is the one that may not make it, but it's our spirit. And that's what this whole journey has really been about for me, is healing the spirit, because that's our soul. And our soul goes on and on. The body, it's just here kind of like a play toy, if you will. It, we die and we put it in the box and we move on and go find another toy, perhaps. I don't know. And that's how I view that principle of con ganas, and being willing to just hang in there even during the dark days. And there are dark days. And the thing that's important, and one of the reasons I'm so grateful for the work I've done with you, is in my being positive, that's not to say that I'm never negative. What I do experience is when I fall into those days of or despair or anguish or fear, and I've experienced fear where my whole body was shaking at times. It's like I can get back to center because of the skills I've learned through you and and other people and some of the other work that I have done. And that's the part that I try to transmit to people. It's be mindful of the journey. What is happening in your journey? Do you experience more fear before each time you go to an infusion, or do you experience it when you go to get a CAT scan? Like for me, every time I go to get a CAT scan or a PET scan or what other kind of scan they want to do, it's always like, oh my gosh, is the cancer coming back? Or oh my gosh, it's spread. I'm in my second remission now, and I had a CAT scan last week, and I was aware that anguish was there, that anxiety. Where before, you just kind of go and you sit there and you don't bring a mindfulness to it. And so that's one of the gifts I've gotten from cancer. It has made me more mindful, more aware, be more aware of what's happening in my body in the moment.
Wow. Yeah, that's beautiful. Patricia, was there ever, I'm going back to Conganos,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Ganas.
des ganas,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
desire, willingness, and action.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know that you had the desire to fight this and to heal? And did you
Well,
ever have a moment where you thought, I'm not sure? Or like, what advice would you have for someone, whether they're experiencing cancer or just life, to know their desire?
I think for me, part of what helped me was that all five of my brothers have gone through cancer, and I've lost four of them. And I spent 2 months with one of my brothers in a hospice center, almost 24/7 with him. And so that experience really gave me an opportunity to see what it is that people experience. They experience the pain, they experience the loneliness, the frustration, the desire to want to get back. I think most people see cancer as a battle that they've got to win. I'm going to beat this. And I sort of have pulled away from that, not to say that it isn't part of the journey, but for me, if we say we're battling cancer or we're at war with cancer, it still puts us at opposite sides and there's a war going on, and that doesn't lead to healing. Whereas if we say, okay, let's see what's going on here. I have cancer. Okay, it appeared in my body. What is it trying to teach me? What can I learn from it? Um, what what kind of support do I need to help me get through it? You know, I always said I will never have chemo after seeing my brothers go through it. Well, when they told me, that that was the first option, I knew that I would use chemo as a tool to help me in the learning process of what is this whole journey of cancer all about. Whereas without it, I didn't have the experience or didn't have the resources to go explore other resources. And for me,
Is it fair to say that your desire was to learn and grow?
yes, yeah, that's been my main desire. So,
Wow. What have you learned?
what have I learned? I could write a book on that one. But the main thing I have learned is I've learned to love myself from the inside out instead of expecting the outside in. You know how you talk about all the different things that we try to prove? Well, for me, the things that I had grown up with was trying to prove that I was okay. I tried to prove that I could do it. I tried to prove that, I could live in a world that was run by men, with my 5 brothers. And I learned that my brothers were both protective, very protective of me. And that both helped me and it also disempowered me. So I've had to work through that and feel that power from within me. So I would say that those are the main things that I have learned, is learning to love myself, learning to let go of the guilt, the shame that I wasn't good enough, that I was always second best.
Because you were a girl?
Because I was a girl, because I was a Chicana, because, I was a lesbian, because, I, was poor, whatever you name it, I've been through it. And I think that's part of what gives me credibility in my journey, is that for me, it's not a head trip. I've experienced it. I know what it is to not be included. I know that feeling. I know the feeling of what it is not to have, the nice clothes that other people have. I know what it is to sometimes wonder, where am I going to get the things I need?
Yeah. And this is the second time you've mentioned this idea of masculine and feminine, or, the patriarchy, without using that word. So I think we'll come back to that,
Okay.
I'm guessing. Tell me, what's number 3?
Number 3 was my dad's principle, which was one day I came home from school and I was crying. And he said, "What's the matter?" And I said, "Ronnie called me a dirty Mexican." And that really hurt me because, my mom, was the one thing my mom always did. She always made sure, we were clean, our clothes were clean, etc. And my dad looked at me and he said, "Let me tell you something." He says, "You are like the dandelion." He said, you have a very strong foundation. You come from strong roots. And he said, no matter how many times you get put down or cut down, you come back even stronger. And so that was my message to him, that, I wouldn't let anything keep me down. I became an overachiever.
So would you say the principle is come back stronger? Is it about resilience?
Well, I call the principle be like the dandelion.
Be like the dandelion. Yes.
And it's interesting because this past spring, my backyard was full of dandelions, because I don't use pesticides or anything in my backyard, but it was full. So I knew my dad was with me all spring long.
Oh, that's so wonderful. So obviously, I can see the parallel in your journey of being in remission for the second time, coming back stronger. I feel that from you. Your energy feels so strong and clear and calm
Thank you.
and grounded. How would you advise someone to be like the dandelion, whether they're on a healing journey, health-wise, or transformationally, right? Like healing their past trauma, like that was a trauma you experienced.
That's a powerful question. I would say that the first thing is that it's not so much what we have to learn, but what we have to unlearn.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is our society, particularly here in this country, is so geared to one form of success.
Mm.
And if we don't fit that pattern or that form, somehow there's something wrong with us. And what I've learned, and I learned more consciously now as I get older, is that we're already good enough when we come in. That's why we chose to come in, because we're already good. We're an expression of that source. We're an expression of that energy and vibration. And so we don't have to apologize for anything. And when people knock us down, ask ourselves, is that true? As Byron Katie might say sometimes, is that true? And it's not. We're living under a pretense, a falsehood. And so the first thing is to just acknowledge that we're already good enough as we come in. And, even in our darkest day, there's still something good about us. We're here.
Absolutely. Wow. When you speak to, we're trained that there's one form of success. What do you like if you had a magic wand and you could reimagine the world where we're trained that there's many ways success can look like? What would that be like? What would change? What would you do with your wand?
Magic dust all over. Sprinkle the ocean, sprinkle Mother Earth, sprinkle the mountains. For me, it comes to learning to accept, first of all, who we are. I've done a lot of work in the area of diversity and inclusion, and it's been very important for me. And one of the things that I have said is that it's not enough just to learn about the history of our things. It's important, but to me, it's more important to learn who we are as a person first. And so if I could take my magic wand, I would teach the 4 principles that I've learned and
Mm.
use them as the bridge to create success as defined by the person themselves, and in collaboration and cooperation with all others around them that impact our life.
Yes. I have a client who has the Finding Human Institute, and it's all
Mm.
about that. I feel like I need to connect you.
Oh, I'd love to meet them.
Yes.
Mhm.
Um, you mentioned the lesson from your father had its ups and downs because on the one hand, it gave you the courage to persist and to keep growing no matter how anybody reacted to you. But then you mentioned that it also programmed you to prove yourself. What do you what do you imagine? How could someone be like the dandelion without trying to prove they're okay to the outside world?
Well, I think it all starts from the very beginning of who we teach our children to be and become, and help them be empowered.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times when we talk about empowerment, people mistake it and think that it means it's free license to do whatever. Well, I don't see it that way. That's where, part of my traditional upbringing comes in. There has to be limits to something.
How do you see it?
Pardon me?
How do you see empowerment?
I see empowerment as the ability to be able to observe something and see it. Is it something that will help growth, or is it something that will take away from growth?
Mm.
And do I have the courage to move toward that growth?
Mm. Oh, yeah.
That willingness that my papa talked about, the con ganas. Do I have the ganas to do it, to want to do it? And, going back to the initial principle, mi abuelita, mi lele, con cariño, to ourselves, to others, to all beings, one of the things I'm learning through Pepito as he ages and everything is being patient with him.
Mm,
He's experiencing his own journey, and I noticed that sometimes he does get more anxious than he used to. But I have
mhm.
to be aware. It's developing an awareness. It's a training, just like listening. I've often said, we tend to think that listening is somebody talking to us, and then we react like we have we either have to prove them that they're wrong, or we have to prove that, one-upsmanship or whatever. But listening to me is really hearing what it is that the person is saying from deep within themselves.
Mm.
One of the principles, I call them principle, but was that I learned from you was the one from oh, what's his name? That says you are never as empowered as you are when you are first heard and
Mm,
acknowledged without judgment for your experience.
mm,
Dave Hawkins, I think his name.
mm,
And that to me is the thing. And I was lucky enough to have worked with a gentleman for 3 years that we taught those kinds of listening skills. And this we stopped working in 1980. He can still to this day go back and share conversations we had and remember every word I said.
wow.
It's incredible. He was, I mean, you talk about learning to listen. He was the best listener I've ever heard.
Mm,
And I was very fortunate to be able to learn through him and use that skill.
amazing. Well, what's the fourth principle of healing?
Oh, the fourth principle brings it all together. It's like the two male principles are the in betweens, and the outer principles are the feminine. So it's like
Okay.
they cover, con cariño. And with my mother, the fourth principle is como las mujeres, which means like the women. And I always saw my mother as strong. My mother was compassionate. My mother was nurturing. She was very giving of herself, and that that hung in there with me. Although growing in a family with 5 boys,
Mm,
it was silenced in many ways, because with 5 boys, that was a domineering energy. And just my physical stature alone was small. I was tiny when I was a little girl. And even my up until, I would say, I around 30, I was much smaller than I am now. So all of that thing. But the principle that my mom gave me with through Como las Mujeres was watching how she and her sisters engaged, and
mm,
how there was always that sense of cooperation, that sense of collaboration, that sense of support for one another. I remember so clearly when my mom passed, nobody had to ask her say anything. Her sisters were all there, making all kinds of preparations, to prepare for the ceremonies and everything else. And that was just what they did. And so I
mm.
learned that we call it networking now, but those were the guidelines, the stepping stones, if you will, to success. And as I see the world now and I see what's happening, I think that those are the skills that are being required, in companies, etc., to be successful, is to use more of that collaborative, networking, supportive culture, if you will, to bring forth success, to bring forth
Mm,
humanity being able to express ourselves in a way that uplifts everyone.
yes. I'm thinking of your healing journey and your support team
There
and
you
how
go.
you got the experience of that in the
Mhm.
real world. Can you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, it was interesting because my dear friend, in fact, she was a former partner, and we've stayed friends through the years and everything. And she told me one time when she took me up for a medical appointment up in Seattle, she said, "I'm not going to be taking you up there." She says, "Don't count on me." I said, "Okay, fine." And that really hurt, because here's this person I've known since I was in college. And I thought, okay, that's a big, big message. I'll have to follow. And I said to her, that's okay. I said, I trust that somebody will be there that I need to. So anyway, the New Year's Eve of 2020, I was at a party at her house. And that's when I met Judy and Sherry. And it was like, the universe serving its course, and it brought us together, and we hit it off, and we started a friendship, and just just happened. It's allowing the universe to take its course.
Yeah.
And that's the main thing. You asked me what I had learned. I would say that's the second thing I've learned is to stay open to the magic, stay open for the miracle, because they do happen. They're happening everywhere. We're just not paying attention.
Yeah. What did it take for you? And maybe it was natural. Maybe your mother instilled this, but I know, when I've had people close to me on a cancer journey, they can have a really hard time receiving help,
Mhm.
receiving support. What did it take for you to know, oh, these people genuinely want to support me and it's okay and I can receive that?
Mhm. Yeah, that was one of the hardest things for me, and that's been one of the biggest gifts I've received, is learning to receive
Hmm.
and making the choice that it's okay to receive. It doesn't make me weaker. In fact, it brings out the strength in me to be able to ask for what I really need. It's part of the self-care. It's part of the con cariño to ourselves. It's allowing that to come in. And so as I reflect on it, if I feel uneasy when I ask for help, okay, it's just reflecting back at what's going on in my body. My body is telling me that there's still a piece of unworthiness that I'm experiencing,
Mm.
and so I just release it and I say, it's okay to ask for help. I don't need to feel guilty, because before, with one of my brothers specifically, he was very giving, but there was always something attached to it, and you knew you'd have to pay a price somewhere along the line.
Mhm.
And rather than giving it freely, whereas, for me, I've always been a person that, people say you give too
Yeah.
much. And so trying to reach that balance, but
Yeah.
it's been an exciting journey. I used the word, in one of the support groups I was in, I used the word that for me, one of the gifts that I had gotten from cancer is that it's delightful. The journey, and people looked at me like, "Are you kidding me?" Because there's still, and then that's not to say, like I said, that cancer in the physical aspect and the emotional, it can take over. And there's nothing delightful about it. I mean, there's nothing delightful when your body feels like it's been run over by a convoy of Mack trucks. There's nothing delightful if you're experiencing nausea or diarrhea or just total yeah. But what is delightful for me is being able to enter the process in a whole different way, in a more open way. That's the delightful part.
Mm.
And I also learned that, sometimes I have to be careful about the words that I use, because where I may be experiencing that's not necessarily true for other people, and it's okay.
Yeah. It's funny, delightful is one of my sourced energy words right now.
Oh,
So
really?
it's a
Oh,
very
so cool.
alive word for me. I love it. Um, yeah, and people are all having their own experience. I think what I'm hearing in this conversation overall is that this experience has caused you to get present and allow in a new way. And that feels like the gift. Yeah, it's so beautiful.
What,
Earlier you
what,
talked about letting,
say that. What comes up for me is that I've always known that there's I don't know, some people use the word abundance, but I've always known that everything's okay, that this place can be a joyful place. And I've never felt comfortable expressing my joy, because there was always either a punishment or a price I had to pay when I expressed it.
mm,
And now that joy is allowing itself to just flow whenever it needs to flow. And when I need to be quiet, I'm quiet. When I need to say something hard to somebody, I say it. But I say it with love and not as harsh as I may have done so in the past. And
mm,
I think for me, one of the things that kept me back from, really going forward when I was first started working with you, and I thought, you were going to help me. You were there to help me build a business. No, I think the biggest gift I got from you was instilling in me all of these qualities that prepared me to go through this journey now. That
mm,
now the flower is blooming. You helped plant the seed. You taught me how to nurture the seed so that it could start growing. And then the cancer has brought out the experiences that have allowed it to grow. And now the flowers are blooming.
Amazing. I can't wait to see what's next.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be fun.
I'm so glad you said yes to this.
Yeah, I was blown away. I went, whoa, what is this? But again, it's the magic. It's like the woman I met. We've become really good friends, and she's going through some hard times right now because her cancer has returned. She's an 8-year veteran of journeying through cancer. And when I first met her, I noticed her little hat that she was wearing that day, and I commented on it. And that was our initial connection. And that's what I'm talking about, when we talked earlier. How do we make people feel comfortable? And we've built on that relationship right from the get-go. And that was just, who would have thought that it would take that little hat to bring two souls together that would bloom into this wonderful friendship that we have. And she's the one that's really encouraged me to do writing, and she helped me, do an article that was published in one of the magazines that the cancer community has.
So, amazing.
Yeah.
Well, when we worked together, and we were working a lot with captivating the room with your talk and telling your stories and all of that. And, one thing I always could count on you for was captivating a room, and people were always drawn in by your stories. And this more embodied, present version of Patricia. I can't wait to hear where else you share these principles.
Yeah, that's become my new mission. I thought I wanted to do work with educators, and I still do, because to me, that's how I keep my contact with kids. And kids are, I have so much faith in our young people. That's what's going to save this planet, is our young people. I don't care what people say. And what I feel my job is to help bring the older people in, and bring the young people up, and help them, become who they really are. Because, I look at what they're doing, like the young woman from, I think, sweet Greta, that's the climate change activist, I look at Malala, all the work that she's done, risked her life, and, it's just incredible. The young man from Florida that's working in gun violence prevention. These kids, they've got it, and they're not giving up their power. I told the teachers, I'd say I started saying this about 5 years before I left the classroom. I said, we have to change how we teach kids, because they're not giving up their power. Especially the girls. The girls know who they are. And
yeah, because isn't it all unlearning that we're all doing, who are older, who were conditioned in the education system that did not give us sovereignty or choice.
Right.
Yeah. So as we close here, I'm present with your ancestors and how they've influenced you, and the healing work that their lessons have given you. And when you heal your lineage. And you've got the feminine, the masculine, the feminine, which has come up a couple times. So as we close, I would love just, what would you say you've learned about those two energies and how they integrate within you?
Yeah, great question. I would say that for me, Darla, as I reflect, we are taught basically both energies to be disempowered. It's just that one energy has been given the authority to operate more, because they were the original power brokers, and they still are. And I think this election was somewhat an example of that, still demonstrating. So having grown up with 5 brothers, the masculine energy was very prominent. My dad was, of the authority. That was always very clear. And my brothers were always, very much authority too. They protected me. I mean, don't anybody ever try to do anything for me, because they'd have a fight with my brothers. I mean, my brothers would have killed them. One of my brothers used to park about a mile from where we lived, just so he could see when I was coming home from my date. And this was when I was in college. And so they wouldn't let me, while they protected me on one end, on the other side, They wouldn't let me try things. Like I love trying to learn how to build things and make things and stuff. And they wouldn't let me do that. That was their domain. I was always called the tomboy, le hombrera. In the feminine, I saw through my mom, but it was always acquiescing to the male authority. And I didn't like that at all.
Well, we know, the feminine did not prevail in this election.
Right.
What do you see for the future in terms of feminine power? And just like in short, right? Like what do you wish for? Like if I imagine these airwaves bringing this podcast to people who are maybe, that woman who grew up knowing she's magical, but not really being supported to show up in that way, right? What would you say you see for that type of person in our future?
That's a tough question. To be honest with you, Darla, I can't say that I have an answer at this time because I myself have been going through my own process of what does this mean? I have to be very honest and say, as you well know, I've been very much a social and political activist all of my adult life, and I wasn't as much this time. And when I say that, I wasn't externally as active. I was internally very active of trying to see the whole process kind of as an observer of looking for the deeper meaning. What is the deeper meaning of all that is happening right now? And what I see real quickly is I see that we're going to have to go through perhaps some more darkness in order for the light to emerge. But the flame has been lit. And it can't help if we nurture it, if we trust ourselves, it can't help but grow. Look what happened between Liz Cheney and Kamala Harris, two very diametrically political, but how they came together. And that's what I think is going to be happening more and more if we allow it. But it's up to us to allow it and not get caught up in the trap all over again.
Como las mujeres. Beautiful.
For me?
Como las mujeres.
Mujeres, that's right. Yeah, no, I have a lot of faith and hope, and I look at the young girls. I was talking with a young woman yesterday, and I was asking her, she's having to work 2 jobs. I said, tell me, I said, what's going on for you? She was having work, she's working 2 jobs. She has a 17-year-old son. She said, I'm having a hard time eating my rent this month. That's basic survival. Someone who is in that place is not going to be thinking up here, like some people would say the woo stuff. But to listen to her and help her, I gave her some resources. I said, do you mind if I offer some resources for you that you might look? And she called me this morning and she said she was going to call them today. So that's what it's going to take. It's just continuing to trust and be more discerning of who we trust.
Beautiful. Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you.
This has been wonderful. I love you so much. Thank you for your generosity. And please keep me posted on what you're up to, and we'll let you know when this will air.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for being here, and we'll see you in the next episode of Activating Magic. Bye, everyone.